Welcome back to another installment of Com 201 Online, coming to you today from the top of Mount Everest because technology will let us do that, so why not? You can tell I've beat some other folks up here, but everybody wants to rule the world. So, speaking of ruling the world, in order to do that, you're going to need to be able to persuade people to vote for you or give you the power that you want. Now, we won't be taking on world changing events in specific ways in our class, but we do want to take on something that is a real issue facing our nation, as you know. So, what we're going to talk about today are elements of persuasion that are crucial if you want to be an effective persuader. So, let's get into that. Now, when you start over on the PowerPoint side here, let me ask you a question before we move forward. When you have someone coming to give a speech and you know they're going to persuade you, or try to anyway, what is the first thing you notice about that person? Some people will answer the way they carry themselves, their energy, maybe their physical appearance. And I think all those can be close to right, but I think there's one very specific thing we look at first, and it's their face. We want to know what's going on with their face. That's where their eyes are, that's where we look. So when you are persuading people, or again, trying to, people are going to look at your face first. And that's why I endorse these Dead Sea skincare cosmetic products. These are wonderful. They help with any skin tone and any skin tone. I'm just kidding. That is not what I'm here to tell you about. But I do want to tell you just a brief story, and I promise this will relate to persuasion. So, what you see on the screen now on the PowerPoint is a mall kiosk, and not just any mall kiosk. This is one of the ones from the Dead Sea Skincare Company. Now, if I asked you how many of you have interacted with folks at a kiosk, but specifically that kiosk, some of you I think would raise your hand. I've never had a class where no one's ever um, interacted with folks that are selling that stuff. What happens there is that you are usually approached. It's not something that you need to stop and go over and interact with them. They come to you. Quick story. So this is Christmas, gosh, 2005, I guess. No, 2007. And I just finished a master's degree. So I wanted to go get some Christmas presents. I needed three. That was it. I needed one for my mom, one for my then girlfriend, now wife, and one for her mom because get her mom something. Trust me on this. So I go to a store in the mall where I had a credit card. It's like the Macy's of the South, Belk. So I go to Belk. I get three things, really the cheapest stuff I could find that they wouldn't open and ask me why I wrapped garbage. And I leave the store. I have to go down an escalator to get back to where I parked. As I'm coming down the escalator, I notice a kiosk, and it happened to be where they were selling Dead Sea skincare. Um, there was a woman working, and I noticed that she looked remarkably like an actress named Cote de Pablo, who, if you're not familiar, she plays the character Ziva on NCIS. I know it's me and your grandma's favorite show. I really am a fan of the actress. I think she's just a beautiful woman. In fact, I have a dog named Ziva. That's not supposed to say she's a dog. Go with me on that. But nonetheless, I look at her and I think, wow, she looks a lot like Ziva. I don't want to be the creeper, right? So I'm not staring at her. I look down. You know, I'm going down the escalator, so I'm watching the bottom, and then I'll look back up, and yep, she sure does. That's kind of incredible. What do you know? Come back up, take another look, and by the time I reach the bottom, I'm looking down so I can step off, and not fall down and bust my face. And I see feet in front of me, and I look up, and it's her, and she has seen me see her, and she puts her hands out. She just says, "Come with me." I said, "Okay, yeah, like wherever you want to go, I'm going to go." So we go over to her kiosk, and she asked me, "When's the last time you washed your hands?" I don't know, a couple hours, maybe. She says, "I bet you're filthy." And I'm like, "Yeah, she said filthy." Long story short, she washed my hands. Really, what she was doing was exfoliating my hands. And at that point in life, I had never exfoliated anything. And so, I mean, it was just nastiness, right? Dead skin and all that stuff coming off. And so, long story, even shorter, I stood there for almost a full hour and ended up leaving with $250 worth of skincare products that I put on a credit card, and I had no business doing that. I mean, I was really not in a good financial position, but she had been persuasive. Now I realized what happened. When I got home, I was angry because I realized I had been had. Right? She was able to read me and work me, basically persuade me to do what she wanted me to do. And that was extra aggravating because, as I just said, I had just finished a master's program that was supposed to teach me how to identify that and avoid that. But, I guess your eyes can get in the way of some of this clear thinking. And that's what we're going to talk about today. How we have to remain clear headed. We have to think about what that other person needs or wants in order for us to get what we need or want. This really is sort of my bread and butter. I mean, this is strategic interpersonal communication is persuasion. Manipulation is one way to think of it, and we're not gonna get down into the dirt with that. But this is something I promise you will be able to use this stuff forever. So let's get back to that. Now, we're going to talk about credibility, logic, and emotion. And all of that plays into what persuasion is. Now, I want to ask you when you started to persuade people. And the correct answer to that is as soon as you were born. Now, you did not realize what you were doing. You weren't doing it purposefully, but you start crying when you're born. I mean, I know they smack you in the butt, but that's not the reason you're crying. You're crying because you're cold. Think about it. You have been in a sauna, basically, right? I mean, you're in there. It's 98 degrees. It's dark. It's wet. You're in just this. It sounds different because there's this sound barriers. Sort of like a little confinement chamber. The things that we would pay money now, the isolation chambers to go and float in. You're there. Suddenly, you're not anymore. You go through this violent motion to leave that area and come out into this world where now instead of 98 degrees it's like 70. Instead of being dark, it's super bright because it's a medical room. Instead of being this quiet muffled sounds, everything is loud because your ears are sensitive and you can't breathe right away. So you want to go back in. You're cold, you're scared, you don't know what's going on. So you cry. Now, babies might cry because they're hungry, because they're tired, you name it. But we start to persuade people at that age without even knowing what we're doing. Hear me out on this. For me, persuasion it's a survival instinct. It's a defense mechanism if you think of it. I hate to paint a grim picture, but if someone were physically in front of you threatening your life, they ask you if you had any last requests, most of us would say, please don't kill me. We would start to beg for our lives. Not because we would think, oh, okay, well, if I beg, he'll probably not kill me. He or she, I should say, probably not kill me. That's not going to factor in their brain at that point if they've come this far. But it's just naturally what we do because we want to preserve our lives. And that's why we, as children, as babies, cry. I mean, it's the same thing. We need attention. We know we need it now. And so we make noise to get it. That's part of us as humans. We get a little older. Maybe you're this little guy's age here, and you're in the front of the grocery cart there. This is sort of like my son right now, and he enjoys sitting up there. He can talk, of course, but his language is limited, as most 3-year-olds are. But when we go to a store, he points and tells me, like, Daddy, want it? He'll point. So with that, at that age, you're also persuading. You're still not using logic. You're not making good arguments for why you should or should not get something, but you are identifying something and bringing attention to yourself. Whereas before, as a baby, as an infant, you're only bringing attention to yourself. You're not able to point, sort of like at your bottom and say, this is what I need, or point at your face and be like, I'm hungry. Do this because you're cold. We just bring attention. Now, this guy can show us what he wants. Still, very rudimentary persuasion. Now, this is a different story. Just a little bit older. A lot changes in that short period of time. And she has this brand new bike. It's not just any bike, boy. That's a Frozen bike. She got her training wheels on there. She's ready to rock. Now, parents often buy their children bikes, but sometimes kids need to figure out a way to ask for those, especially when you get the training wheels off and you've got one of those bikes with the handlebar brakes instead of like this one with coasters. And sometimes kids will start to use some logic when they want something around this age. So this little girl, I'm sure she's a fine young lady, but let's say that she came up with some different schemes, we'll call them, to get a bike. One of them might be the classic everyone else has it, so I need it, right? I mean, that's something we've all heard, probably done at some point in our lives. There's another classic one that is this is a little more advanced, but it's the birthday negotiation. So I used this one as a kid. My birthday is in September. And so I remember doing it for a bike. And I asked my mother in, I guess it was like May, can I have this bike? She said, no, you can have it for your birthday. I said, okay, well, hear me out. Let me go ahead and get it now. And then for my birthday, you don't have to get me anything. Not only that, though, but it makes sense because summer is almost here. And if we wait until my birthday in fall, I'm only going to be able to use it for like a month. And then I'm just going to put it away and it will be, a waste of money when we could use it better now. And she said, okay, let's do that. And I'm thinking, oh, really? That worked? Oh my God. She said, yeah, we can do that. Now, do you not want to eat until your birthday either? Because that seems to make sense to me. I mean, my mom's a great person. She's upstairs right now taking care of Levi, but it didn't work in my case. But I know it does for some. Other ones, if you're really advanced, you might say something like, you're always telling me to get out of the house. But if I had a new bike, I'd be outside all the time. Whether or not you would, who knows? But again, at this age, you're starting to use a little more logic. Well, we're not at that age. We're much more advanced, and we've used different approaches. And each individual in this class has an approach that they use depending on who it is that they're speaking with. I mean, if you're trying to get something from your parents, you know what works best. If you're trying to get something from a significant other, you know what works best. Professionals, you name it. And then if we're not sure, we go with what has worked before. It's called a schema for that. But for us in this course, what we want to do is focus on trying to use logic and understand persuasion. Now, when you think of what we're trying to do with persuasion, what we're trying to do is attempting to change attitudes, behaviors, beliefs, values, that sort of thing. And I know we've all heard of the humans are like onions, they have many layers. And that's what we'll go with here as an example. And if you think about this onion, the outer layer would represent attitudes. They're on the outside because they're very easy to change, especially in relation to the others. An attitude might be something about like a preference. I think there's been another video where we touched on this and we talked about my favorite drink and that you could change my mind about it. Same kind of thing if you're at a ice cream parlor and your favorite I say parlor, really. You're at an ice cream shop and your favorite flavor is strawberry, but they don't have strawberry. And so instead of getting mad, they say, I'll tell you what, instead of 1 scoop, I will give you 2 scoops of raspberry. How's that? Okay, sure. And that'll change your attitude about it. It's not that hard to do. A little deeper, though, are your beliefs. These are like religious beliefs, as we've talked about briefly. And these are harder to change. Again, if you brought in a speaker and tried to change us in one speech, it likely wouldn't happen because those are deeper. It takes time to get there. And of course, our values are at our core. This is our right, wrong, good, bad. This was the example we talked about with Nazi Germany and taking what were generally good people and turning them into either killers or enablers of killers. Now, one thing that's important to understand also is how behaviors tie into all this. Behaviors can really fall on any of these levels. On the outside, they could be really easy to change. I mean, if we were in a real classroom and you said to me, got to class a little early, we're having a conversation, you say, I'm going to go grab a drink before class starts out of the machine. And I say to you, oh, hey, since you're going, here is money. Will you also get me a drink? Most of you would do that because it doesn't really burden you, right? And so I've convinced you to do it just by asking. That's all it took. That could be very, very easy. But again, when you get to that core and, making these life and death decisions, literally life and death decisions, that is changing behaviors in a very, very serious way. I tell you that to remind you that for us, we want to focus mostly on attitudes. We want to make some what we would call incremental changes. And so, for example, if you have a speech on recycling, you want people to recycle more, and they don't recycle at all now, you don't want in one speech to try to get them to, recycle everything and just compost and they change their entire lifestyle. If that happens, great, but it's unlikely. If they have zero recycling going on in their lives, though, maybe you can get them to collect cans and recycle their cans. Obviously, you can talk about this saves you money because you get 10 cents per can back and yada yada. But again, changing those attitudes is what we're focused on. Now, next thing here. What we've got to be very clear about is that persuasion and coercion are not the same thing. Coercion is when you take something by force or you remove what is considered free choice. Now, there are arguments out there that there is always free choice. In this situation depicted here, imagine like a bank setting. You got the robber with the gun. You have to think he probably said, "Give me the money or I will kill you." That teller would have the choice to say, "Well, then kill me." But that's not a legitimate choice in the way we think of logic. That takes away that free choice. So we want to avoid coercion. And when you think of topics like ours, let's say it was that recycling speech, you cannot say, if we don't all start recycling, we're going to die. There's some things wrong with that. We are all going to die anyway. The opposite is not true. So if I do start recycling, I'm not going to not die. And so you've got to be careful with how you phrase things. What you could definitely say is, unless we all start to recycle, we are setting a precedent for our planet that puts us in peril and the environment in a terrible position that will cause more, pollution, which can lead to illness, which can lead to death. You're now logically linking things together instead of just skipping all the middle part and saying, if you don't recycle, you'll die. That's not what we want to do. Now, when we think of persuasion, the key old school, original, always there model is this, the rhetorical triangle. This comes to us from Aristotle and Socrates. With this, you've got 3 points on the triangle: ethos, logos, and pathos. Ethos is all about credibility, the credibility of the speaker specifically. We, mostly for this class, aren't going to have speakers that are experts. We talked about those when we talked about sources. So when you have quality sources, that bolsters your credibility. It's the same thing here when we talked about what you wear on the very first day when we had the syllabus speech or syllabus video. When we said you don't have to dress up, but don't wear something that might take away from your credibility. You always want to add to that. So with ethos, try to be as credible as you can. Again, good sources, good appearance, being prepared, that sort of thing helps ethos. Next up, we move down and talk about logos. Logos is a logical argument, or having your argument clearly organized. Logical arguments, well, I should back up and say that arguments that are not logical aren't easy to follow. You have probably had we'll call it debate, argument, whatever you want to say, with someone else where their side just didn't make any sense to you. Maybe they had a couple points in there somewhere, but because of the logical attempts that were failed, right, the way they strung things together, it didn't seem effective. It didn't make sense. So what we need to remember is to logically make those arguments. Just like in the example of, if you don't recycle, you will die. You need to make sure that you are connecting dots, right? So that is one key thing that you'll want to remember. We're going to come back to logic in a second. The last part of this is pathos. Over here, this is the emotional appeal to your audience. This is when you're really trying to reach out and connect with them. And we'll talk about things like fear and compassion, pride, guilt, all that. But this is when you want to turn on the feelings, right? You don't want to overload with any of these. We'll come back to that. But you also need to address each one. Now, currently in our world, pathos is the most, I guess, valuable overall, at least in our society. What I mean there is you don't have to have a ton of credibility if you say the right thing because people seem to just want to believe something. And you don't have to make a whole lot of sense. If it sounds good, they're still going to believe it. I mean, we can look at politics and see that that is happening. But ideally, in this model that is ancient, you'll want each of these 3 points. Now, Aristotle didn't just use a triangle because it's pretty and it has 3 points. He used a triangle because what happens if you take one of these out? Well, the whole thing collapses. No matter which one you take out, it'll fall apart unless they're all there. And so the argument then is that you need all of these in order to be an effective persuader. So, going back to logic for just a moment. We need to talk about basic logic. It's sort of stuff that you've already learned, but I just want to review it. So if you make a claim, you need to be able to put things together in a way that we'll see it. So if A equals B is the classic example, A equals B, so they're the same thing. And we know that B equals C, but we already know that A equals B, and now B equals C, then A equals C. If this makes no sense to you, I understand, but you'll want to think about how this might play out in a speech, and that you'll need to be as logical as possible with your arguments. The next example there is technically a syllogism. That's fun to say. But the idea here is that you make claims. There's a major and a minor claim, and then the end here. So you've got men are mortal. Aristotle is a man, thus Aristotle is immortal. Now, that is accurate. However, these aren't always accurate. So if you said things like, gosh, I just went blank on the example I wanted to use with that. But there could be something wrong. Okay, so let's say summertime. Well, I guess the classic example is this. In summertime, there are more ice cream sales. Point one. In summertime, there are more drowning deaths. Thus, ice cream causes people to drown. It makes sense to a degree in this model, but not when we step back and think about it largely. We know that in summer, ice cream sales go up. Why? Because it's hot. We know that in summer, drowning deaths go up. Why? Because more people swim. Why do more people swim? Oh, because it's hot. So when you have more people in the water, you have more drowning deaths. It's the way it works. So be careful of oversimplifying things. Also be aware of overgeneralizing from limited data. This happens so often. People will have a personal experience, something that happened to them, and then they want to overgeneralize and say that that's the way things are. And that's just not it. You hear this with, boyfriends, girlfriends. You say, oh, guys are just terrible, or women are just terrible. It's like, no, the guy or the woman that you had an experience with was terrible. That doesn't mean that everyone is. Well, I've had two, and they're all bad. Both, not all, both. And that's very different from all. We talk about this in like advanced research courses a lot. If you just see something happen and it seems to be an issue. Well, I see a lot of students vaping on our campus. I can imagine that, gosh, like half our campus vapes. It's really like 10%. So, you got to be careful with jumping to conclusions from very limited data. When you do that, you're using what's known as faulty logic. The biggest example of faulty logic are fallacies. Let's talk about those for a minute. I'm going to bring this up just a little here. Fallacies are everywhere. We have them in relationships. We have them in politics. We have them in advertising. You name it. What we want to do is cover, not all because there's well over 200, but we're going to cover some of the most popular ones that will be seen in presentations like yours. Now, half of the reason we do this is because I don't want you to use these in your persuasive speeches. The other half is because I want you to be aware of what these are, so that if someone tries to, pull one over on you, you can say, oh, no, this is you're able to identify it, hopefully, and then call it out. So we're going to cover a number of these. These are the ones that I think are most valuable for us to know, and we'll jump right into those. The first one is an ad hominem fallacy, or that means to the man, to the person fallacy. It's name calling, attacking a person instead of their position. You see the cartoon there with Trump using nicknames for everyone: Sleepy Joe, Little Marco. And then he's got the Kim Jong Un situation there. I canceled the summit with Kim because he's short, fat, manic madman, and he's also rude with it, and he calls names. Right? We know that the president calls people names. Now, as I mentioned in an earlier video, somehow his speaking style works for him, but generally speaking, it makes you look very weak and very desperate. You can't counter an argument, or you're not smart enough to counter an argument, or you're not, you're overwhelmed to the point where you can't counter it. So you look weak and desperate. And that's one that you definitely want to avoid. If you want to say, here's sort of the very boiled down version. If you want to say, boy, that is a dumb idea, you could say that. But what you can't say is, wow, you're dumb because you had that idea. There's a slight difference there. One aims at the idea, the other aims at the person. Careful. Next up, you've got causal fallacies. This goes right back to that good logic. You're claiming that A caused B to happen, but there's a missing link there. There's weak evidence. Maybe there's confusion of fact and opinion. You're not really connecting the dots. So, the example on the screen there is the U.S. invasion of Iraq. This is, way back in the day now, but when I was in college, this was happening. And at the time, you would ask people, conversations would start. So why are we in Iraq anyway? And often you would not hear about oil or Saddam Hussein or weapons of mass destruction. You would get the very simple answer, 9/11. And you would, if you're thinking, you would say, wait, that's why we went to Afghanistan, because, they were coming from Afghanistan. Oh, well, I mean, it's the same thing. People oversimplify it, but they want to make those causal links without thinking it through. This is the reason why you legally, you can say it, but advertisements, publications can't say that smoking cigarettes cause cancer. Can't say that. It's not scientifically proven. I know, right? Shocking. But what we can say is that smoking cigarettes increase the likelihood of developing multiple diseases, including cancer, that can lead to death. It's walking on eggshells a little there. Some things, boy, they seem like that makes sense, but others, you've got to really make clear connections. There's the old saying in academia that correlation is not causation. So just because two things go up, ice cream sales and drowning, doesn't mean that one causes the other to happen. All right, next, the slippery slope fallacy. This is when folks make an argument that imply or clearly states, if you do one thing, take one step, you're going to slide right down that slope. There's going to be this inevitable sequence of things that happen as a result of taking one step. They usually don't have any, or they don't have any good anyway, evidence. The example was, I guess it still is in some states, legalizing marijuana. What you would hear in the past about that was people really making this kind of case of, well, we can't legalize marijuana because if we do, then here's their big skip. The next thing you know, right, we will have people on every corner with a needle in their arm. It's like, wait, hold up. First of all, who do you buy your weed from? You're shooting weed up? Come on now. But the idea here is that, if we legalize this, then we're going to have this permissive culture that's going to allow everyone to do whatever drugs they want. Same thing happened with same-sex marriage. You used to have people say, we can't allow same-sex marriage because if we do that, where does it stop? The next thing you know, you're going to have men marrying their cars and women marrying their pets, and who knows where this is going to lead. How about two consenting adults, right? So it doesn't need to go further than one or two steps, but people who don't like it will often counter it in a really weak way using the slippery slope. Next up, a bandwagon fallacy. This is where you make the claim that because something is popular, it's right. Now, something can be both popular and right, but because it's popular doesn't make it right. That's the distinction to make there. This is sort of, it's really seen in a lot of ways, but politics can be one. I was a big fan of President Obama, but even in 2008, when he was elected, I know a lot of my friends voted for him, and I'm glad they did. But you would ask them, so what's your favorite policy or something? And they would say, oh, yeah, I don't know, but he was out there with Jay-Z, and boy, that was cool. Oh, okay, well, yeah, okay. I mean, because that's that popularity doesn't make them the right person. I mean, you hear it with Trump too, especially during the election. So what about his background with sexual assault allegations against him? Well, yeah, I know, but he was on The Apprentice. I mean, I watched that show my whole life. Okay, yeah. Now the danger with this is obvious, but it can also lead to groupthink or tribalism. This usually happens out of a desire to be liked because we see that since someone is popular, they have a group of people that are behind them, and we want to be part of something bigger than ourselves. Therefore, we connect ourselves to that group. We don't think about why we're doing it. We probably don't even think about we're doing it because we want to be liked. We just naturally seem to do that as humans. We're what's called gregarious. We want to be around other people. This key example is going to relate back to a lot more people than the others is sports teams that are hot right now. So like the Kansas City Chiefs are the current Super Bowl champions. I'm pretty sure. And what you'll hear is that people jump on the bandwagon. The idea is you may see people who you've never seen wearing Chiefs gear before suddenly sporting a Chiefs hat. And you'd be like, oh, Chiefs fan, huh? Oh, yeah, big Chiefs guy. Oh, okay, well, how long have you been a Chiefs fan? Oh, yeah, long time, long time. But all their stuff's brand new. They didn't have it until people did that. I know around our area in Michigan, we are very loyal. We don't have this. People up here are, you like the Pistons, you like the Lions, you like the Tigers. I mean, it's pretty clear. Of course, the Red Wings. But I did see a few folks wearing Toronto hats when they won the NBA championship. And so these things, they come and go. But because something's popular doesn't mean that you can make the case that it's the right thing to do. Next up, you've got an either or fallacy. This is a fallacy that presents an issue as though there are only two choices or two sides. In reality, there are many middle ground positions. So if you're familiar with continuums, that's what that is at the bottom. It's not like it's just the end blue head of the arrow or the red head of the arrow. There's that whole middle connecting line. This is sort of like an ultimatum. If you've had a significant other that said, well, you need to choose between me or your friends. First of all, choose your friends every time. But that's just a false choice. That's what this might also be called. In that you could hang out with your friends on Saturdays and hang out with your significant other on Sundays. What's the problem? Now, an example of this is the pro-life, pro-choice sort of abortion debate. So if you'll come over and look at the continuum line down here, let's say that this left side, this blue, is pro-choice, and the red side is pro-life. Now, just those two titles, when someone uses them, it goes ahead and gets you in the mindset for this either or fallacy. They'll say, are you pro-life or are you pro-choice? Really, neither is the way most of us should answer that question. I mean, about 5% may be over here and about 5% may be over there, but 90% of us are here. I mean, think about it. If you are pro-life and you identify as on this side of the spectrum, there are likely, not always, but likely exceptions to your stance. I mean, if someone said the mother's health was in danger or that the child was not going to survive if born, or, those sorts of things, rape and incest, she's 12 years old, that kind of thing, then there are often examples of exceptions that will get you to a middle ground position. Similarly, over here, are you pro life or are you pro choice? Oh, I'm pro choice. If you're really pro choice, it's never, or I mean, it's always okay to have an abortion, like, while you're delivering the child. And we probably don't support that. So there may be things like term limits. Okay, well, if you're in the past the second trimester, we can't do that. Yeah, you can have an abortion, but not because of like things like designer babies. Well, we've been pregnant 4 times and we really want a boy, so we keep aborting these girls. I mean, that's something that most of us would cringe about. You know, so there are usually exceptions to any hard two-sided issue. And so make sure that you acknowledge those and you don't make something that is sort of a spectrum seem like two poles and that's all that exists. Next up is a straw fallacy. A straw fallacy it's used to be called a straw man fallacy or basically a scarecrow fallacy. And if you think about a scarecrow out in the field there, um, they're easy to defeat because they're not real, right? This is when you misrepresent the opposition. You make their argument seem like it's just empty and that it's easy to destroy because you don't give it its full due, right? Just like if you went and hit a scarecrow, it'd fall over because it can't fight back. Similarly, with that pro life, pro choice example, people who are pro life will look at people who are pro choice and they'll call them baby killers, which is an ad hominem. But they'll also say things like, you all just want complete heathenism out here, and that's all you're worried about. It's basically anarchy, and that's a weak representation of the argument. But it comes from the other side too. Pro-choice people will look at pro-life people and say, "Oh, you all just hate women and you want to take women's rights back to the 1500s." That's again, it's not a full display of the argument. So make sure that you are giving the other side its due. And when you do that, you should still be able to refute it. And we'll talk about that, but you should be able to knock it down. And so give it its due, represent it fairly, and then tell the audience why it's wrong. Next is the red herring fallacy. So a red herring is a fish, and this goes back to medieval prison breaks. So used to be back in the day, they would lock you up if you had debt, right? Debtor's prison. And so people would spend their lives in prison because they couldn't pay back a debt that they owed. And they were in prison, so they couldn't work it off. Many people would try to escape. It's sort of like low security. So folks would get out and they would run. Now, when they found out, whoever they are, the guards, found out that you weren't there, they released the hounds. That's where we get that sort of phrase from. And so when the hounds picked up your scent, they would follow you. Now, what these convicts were doing was running until they hit water. And when they hit water, they would grab a fish, and apparently herring was popular in that area where this comes from, and they would, sounds gross, rip it in half. They would throw one half of it in one direction, they would throw the other half of it in the opposite direction, and they would run in the third direction because the fourth direction is where they just came from. So when the dogs got to that spot, your scent was weaker because it got in the water. Plus, now there's this really terrible rotting fish smell that interests the dogs, and so it creates a distraction. That's the idea. It creates a distraction. You introduce an irrelevant issue to shift focus. You've probably had this happen in arguments or debates that you've had with family or friends. Somebody will want to say, well, what about the time when you, it doesn't have anything to do with the conversation. I had a girlfriend in college who wanted to borrow my car one morning, and she asked me the night before if she could, and I said, yeah, it's fine, just put gas in it because I don't have very much gas. She said, yeah, it's no problem. So she borrowed the car that morning, brought it back. I get in the car to go to work. I'm running late and there's no gas, like none. So long story short, I got to work, but I couldn't make it home. I had to get a friend of mine to bring me some gas. And so when I finally get back to the house, I'm like, hey, what the hell? You were supposed to get gas. She was like, "Oh, I guess I just forgot about it." And I'm like, "Yeah, well, that's not very responsible. I mean, I thought we had a deal here." And her quick response was, "Well, what about the time you threw away my shirt last week?" And I did. I accidentally threw away one of her shirts. And so, you know, uh, what does that have to do with you not getting gas? I don't know. But it's something that people do. In our politics, especially right now, and you'll see more of this as the election gets closer, trust me, are these what about isms. In the Clinton Trump election, it was what about Bill when he did this? What about Hillary when she did that? And, it was a way of, sorry, I messed up here. It was a way of trying to distract the public and, show them a shiny object. No, don't look over here at my bad stuff. Look over there at their bad stuff. So it's something to be aware of that it happens, and don't let yourself get caught up in it and take the bait, basically, and start looking the other direction. Stay on track if someone tries to use this against you. All right, the last fallacy I want to cover is called an appeal to misplaced authority. This is when you treat non experts as experts. We talked about this with sources, that you need to have expert sources, but here there's usually some extenuating circumstances happening. So maybe it's someone that has an opinion that is charismatic, or they're a popular person. We want to put our trust in them, but it remains true that they are not an expert. I mean, whether that's Jenny McCarthy talking about anti-vax, if that is really any celebrity that's done a commercial for most things. I mean, I've got Justin Bieber up here, and I'm thinking of his Proactive commercials. Now, Proactive is used like tons of people, so I'm not just it's not just Justin. I'm just picking on him because he's I just don't like him. But when you think about this, you've got him as a kid out here playing basketball, and he's, oh, I'm on the road. I know about breakouts, and I use Proactive, and oh my gosh, it's the best thing out there. He makes the claim that it's the best, and it very well may be, but why are we trusting him? I mean, how many books do you think he's read on, well, you could stop there. How many books do you think he's read? But how many books do you think he's read on, mixing together chemicals to clean your face? Uh, None is the answer. So don't trust anyone who doesn't have the authority to give you a very well informed opinion. It's okay to take it into consideration, but don't make your decision on non expert opinion, and don't make your argument on non expert opinion. All right, those are the fallacies I want to cover. And we'll move on from those. Those are, again, logical fallacies, so using logic in a bad way. And now we'll talk about emotional appeals, or really getting back to this idea of pathos. So here, the two big categories are fear and positive appeals. Sometimes people will try to persuade us by telling us all the bad things that can happen to us if we do or do not do something. Other times, people will fill us up with all the great things that could happen to us if we do or do not do something. Case in point, cigarette smoking, right? Trying to get you to quit. Here's a fear appeal. They show you this woman, Terry. Apparently, she's 51 from North Carolina. She has a stoma. She appears to have had cancer treatment. She looks rough for 51 years old. So the fear there is, oh my God, if I don't stop smoking, I could end up just like Terry. I don't want that. In fact, in some countries, I think Australia, if you buy cigarettes on the pack, there's either a picture of a diseased lung or someone in a hospital bed dying of lung cancer, and you can't put your brand on it. You just put that on it, and so every time you smoke, that's what people are reminded of. That works for some folks. For other folks, you need something more positive. This one actually worked for me about 4 years ago now. But this tells you all the benefits of stopping smoking. If you look at the left, it's sort of got the benefits. What happens 20 minutes after your last cigarette? Your heart rate comes down. What happens 12 hours? What happens 2 weeks? What happens 1 to 9 months? A year, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? And it ends up with, it starts with just, you feel a little better, you breathe a little better. And then it ends with, if you haven't developed a smoking related illness after 15 years of not smoking, you're chances of developing that are the same as someone who never smoked in their life. And so, again, you're looking at it in a much more positive way. What I will tell you here is that you do not want to use any of these all the time. Balance out fear and positive appeals. There's sayings, if you just put fear into someone, you're trying to scare them. Maybe you're trying to make them feel guilty, which we'll come back to, but that's not effective when they're overwhelmed with fear. It's also not effective to just, we call it blowing smoke. It's a with cigarette example, but if you blow smoke at someone, you're just giving them sort of this Pollyannic rosy picture of what is going to happen, or at least you're telling them that's going to happen if they do or do not do something. Balance those out. Give them some fear, give them some positive, and you'll have a much more effective argument. Now, other emotional appeals would be things like pride. Products use this. There's proudly made in the USA. Or like Tom's, where your purchase is going to help other people too. You can take pride in that, and that should motivate you in some ways to buy a particular product. In particularly, it might not motivate you to go out and buy a pair of shoes or go out and buy I'm looking around where I'm at, a tool, just because it's made in the USA or because it helps somebody else. But if you already need a pair of shoes, maybe that will make you buy Tom's instead of some other brand. If I'm at a hardware store and I see that one is made in China and the other one's made in the USA, the USA probably costs a little more, but hey, it's proudly made in the USA. Maybe I'll buy it because I want that pride. Another one, guilt. This is again something not to overload people with. Don't blow them up with guilt trips. This is when you want to make someone feel guilty. Like they should have done more, can do more. How have I not acted already? But you don't want to, again, burden them with that to the point of turning them off. So use guilt, but very, very sparingly. Anxiety is another one. This one's really effective depending on your audience. But I've mentioned before that in an attention getter discussion that I recorded for you, that STDs on campus, 1 in 3, 1 in 4 college students has an STD. That attention getter in and of itself is designed to cause anxiety. When you use that, you want the audience to think, oh my God, is it me? And if they're not sure, and that's the point you're getting to, they should probably get tested for it. So again, causing that worry is something that you can design a presentation to do. Last one to discuss here, and there are more, but there's an appeal to real authority, and you want to, give the audience sort of a feeling of comfort that they're doing the right thing because experts agree. You'll hear this a lot. This is actually from a Trident commercial, the gum, where you'll hear all the time 4 out of 5 dentists recommend whatever it is. And this is apparently the dentist that doesn't recommend it. But whenever you even just see someone in a lab coat like that, it bolsters credibility. It bolsters credibility. Right now, with the coronavirus situation, I'm really surprised, and I mean this, that Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx don't come out in lab coats. I think it would be a comforting thing for the public. They would see this. Now we talk about Dr. Birx's, great scarves, but that's not going to save our lives. Her expertise might. And so if I was advising them from a nonverbal interpersonal matter, I would say, hey, take off the scarf, put on your jacket. So those are some appeals that we use that are based on emotion. And no matter what these are, I want you to remember, do not use any of them alone. Make sure you mix these up. At least use 2 different ones that are a little opposite of one another. So fear positive in general. But, maybe feel guilty about this. But hey, you'll feel better about it if you do it. Here's this pride feeling. Last thing here is refutation. I know what you're thinking. You'll hear yourself say this. So if you make an argument for something, we should take an action. We should recycle. You may want to think about sort of devil's advocate. What would the other side say? Is there something that those who are not into recycling would respond with? They'll say, yeah, but, and then, you're going to have to come back to that. So before they can get to question and answer and ask you the yeah, but question. Yeah, but I hear it causes more pollution to recycle than it does to manufacture. Maybe that's something that I've heard before. Okay. Instead of letting them ask you and sort of giving them the ball in their court, you go ahead in your speech before they ask anything and say things like, now listen, I know what you may be thinking. There are some claims out there that recycling products actually puts more pollution into the air than manufacturing those products. I know that you're thinking that, and that could be true. However, and then you refute it, not everything that we recycle needs to be processed in that way. When you think about composting, there's no process with that. When you think about taking your old clothes and then using those as rags for projects, that there's no process in that. When you talk about repurposing wood, for example, there's not a process that creates pollution. It's just your work. So there are ways to show that you're understanding the other side, you respect it, but you still think it's wrong. And that's the idea, to set it up and then knock it down. So, as always, come to the Speech Lab. We have our virtual consultations. There's the Resource Market Online. They can help you with persuasion. They're really good at it. You will also need to use Monroe's motivated sequence specifically, and there will be another video, of course, on that. So let these folks help you not only with your Monroe's, but also your general ability to persuade. And they can definitely be of benefit. As always, if you have questions, definitely let me know. If you don't, great, and keep on working on the good work. I'm going to enjoy the view, and I will see you next time.